Hello, welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui, coming to you from Beijing. A new law which requires children to make regular visits to their elderly parents is causing a lot of controversy and some confusion in China. The legislation says adult children must send their regards and visit often, but doesn't specify how often. But should children ever be forced to visit their parents? Is it right for the state to interfere in family lives? The debate over the new law raises these questions, but also focuses attention on the problem of providing support for the ever-increasing elderly population of China. If children won't take on the responsibility of care, then why should it be left to the authorities and the taxpayers to carry the burden? Joining us in the Beijing studio are Edward Lehman, Managing Director of Lehman, Lee & Xu Law Firm, and Gloria Ai, Business TV host. And later in our program, we shall talk to Professor Takasato Watanabe from Doshita University in Japan. Before we discuss the issue in the studio, let's hear some views from some people directly affected. Our reporter Wang Xinye hit the streets and asked people what they think about the new law.
Chinese legislators have made a new law to protect the feelings of the elderly. It says young ones must go home to visit their parents or face legal action.
I do agree with the new law. It protects the elderly. Some young people should be re-educated and take care of their parents.
I don't believe it is right to make a law. It's a moral issue. No one would want to be forced to see their parents.
It won't do. If the kids do miss their parents, they will go anyway. And if they don't, it won't make the parents happy to see reluctant faces.
I really want to go home more often, but my parents are in another city. It's not possible for me to go back and see them every weekend.
No one doubts it is for the best of the seniors, but many are questioning the enforcement of the law. Even those who have devoted their career to nursing the elderly say it is simply impossible to put it into practice.
There are 5,000 people over 65 years old in this community. Half of them have no children that are living together with them. Most of their children live abroad. There is no way the young ones can come back and see them very often.
Currently, there are more than 200 million elderly people in China. Around the year 2050, that figure may double. And that means 1/3 of the whole population of China will be over 60. Thanks to the one-child policy, many couples will have to look after 4 or even more elderly family members. Adding to the problem, many young people do not even live in the same city with their parents. So here are their questions. I may not be able to go back home very often, but it doesn't mean I don't care about my parents. Am I going to break the law and face legal actions?
I believe this is a misinterpretation of the law. It is a guideline focusing on encouraging young ones to think of their parents. What the law is trying to change is the attitude of indifference towards parents. They may well call or write to parents, but going home is not a must.
On the other hand, young people are expecting more help from the government, such as guaranteed holidays and enough nursing homes close to communities. They say taking care of the elderly is the duty of both the children and the government. Wang Xinye, CCTV, Beijing.
Welcome back to our studio discussion here. We are very happy to be joined here by a beautiful lady, and I believe her family duty is a good example. And Edward Lehman from the United States of America, a lawyer at this moment. Welcome to our discussion. How often do you visit your parents?
Me, like in the past 4 years, I was in U.S. Back then, probably every year I visit my parents, at least twice or 3 times a year. But now, because I moved back to China, almost every month I visit my parents. Yeah.
I believe this law, which has just been passed by the legislature, refers to the elderly parents. I mean, adult children should visit their elderly parents. Most of them should be retirees and pensioners. That's my understanding, Edward.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. Again, the law is going into effect on July 1st, so I mean, it's just gone into effect, and I think we're only a few days, it's early days about how to implement these laws and regulations. There's 200 million people that are now above the age of 60 in China, and this issue is one that they've got to address because we're undergoing the greatest economic transformation in the history of the world. China has undergone that. And how people have reacted in the past, 20, 30 years ago, is completely different from today. And so I think, it's interesting to note, Yang Rui and Gloria, that the Chinese Constitution has that parents must take care of their children and the children must take care of their parents. So this idea is not that old. I mean, it's not just a new idea that's come along in the establishment of the People's Republic of China. So I think it's something that's important.
Yeah, but for me, I think I'm very happy to see the passing of the law, because I think although this is a very good tradition for Chinese to take care of their parents, but still it was bothering between moral and the legal obligations. So it allows the parents now at this moment to protect their benefits and their rights from being compromised. Yeah.
Well, as both of you have said clearly that filial piety is deeply ingrained in the Chinese society and indeed the Chinese culture, and why this time around there's a need of having a law to make it clear that you got to visit your parents, otherwise it's a violation of the law. Now, there have been a lot of debates, online debates, about why the law should interfere with the family lives. I'd like to have your take.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, you've got to start somewhere. And so it's by starting somewhere, by establishing a law and regulation, then you've got to be able to move from these laws and regulations to actual implementation. But I think part of it is education as well. I mean, if it's not in the laws and it's not something that people are aware of, then how can you do it? I also see a great economic shift. I'm not sure that the pensions are enough for people. I think these people who are over 60 right now, they grew up in one kind of culture when the Cultural Revolution and all these things were happening. Now things have changed dramatically. People can leave the country, people can travel and do wherever. And so I think that it's very important and be around the country with and not have that obligation to go back. So I think that this is an important thing to put in their mind. I'm not sure it's going to happen immediately. I think this education is going to happen in a generation later that people will understand it. But I think that there's going to be some pushback in the beginning.
Yeah, I agree with Edward, because I think, as you mentioned before, the elderly population in China is almost reached 200 million.
Right.
So I can see a very serious and huge demand for taking care of the elderly, and also that's a pretty good thing.
Right. I believe demographic changes are also one major hallmark that characterizes what's happening in the modernization of Japanese society, which is already very developed. And let's cross over to Professor Takasato Watanabe with Daoshoto University, Kyoto. Hello.
Hello.
Very, very, very pleased to have you on our program again, Professor Watanabe. I believe many young Japanese choose not to work and live in their hometowns where they grew up, and they instead travel a lot. And in the age of globalization, many of them must have crossed the border to live and emigrate to developed countries like North America and Europe, European countries. In this case, does Japan have any laws to stipulate that elderly children, got to visit their parents very often, otherwise they threaten to violate the law and they will be condemned by the public opinions?
As a law, we don't have such regulations. However, the government, the local government, the communities, and school education suggest that they should visit their parents even if they are working outside the birthplaces. And also, Chapter 13 of the Constitution tells that every Japanese has a right to live happily, and the government must take care of them along the line, so that local government has the welfare commission system. It tells that parents, aged people who are living outside should be taken care of the local government, and local government commissions must tell to their parents and also to the children to have the information, correct information of the aged people. And also, again, we have the welfare system for the insurance. We call it Aged People Care Insurance. Those, regulations are taking care of the problems which are so serious now, because the parents do not want to live with their children, and also children don't want to live them because the cultural differences. But
now, yes, Professor Watanabe, the idea of having family reunion is, of course, very much appreciated in all societies, be it in the West or in the East. Tell me precisely what the relationship is like between you and your children.
Yes, our children, I have 3 children, but they are living not with us. I am living with my wife, and it is okay, but we can meet, you see, our children. Children visit us several times a year, and also we can communicate by the telephones and the internet, so it is okay. The big problem is that people who are living in the fisheries areas or agricultural areas and poor, this is very serious in Japan. So if we can overcome social gaps between the upper class and you see, a poor class, we can, to some extent, solve those questions. This is the governmental problems, too.
Are you saying, Professor Watanabe, that in areas where you have a more impoverished population, it is the social security program of the government that should take hold?
Yes, it is a common problem for the developing nations or advanced nations. The government are taking care of the aged people, but they need much money to spend for the medical cares and also for the aged people social welfare. So these must be, you see, completed for the both generations, upper and younger. This is very serious problem that community must take care of.
Thank you very much. That's Professor Watanabe's point of view about how elderly people should be looked after in Japan, a very advanced industrial nation in Asia, in fact, the 3rd biggest economy. Despite the territorial disputes, I believe we have a lot to learn from our neighboring country of Japan, particularly in areas of how to look after the elderly people. We share the same culture, Confucianism. Now, what can you learn from the analysis of Professor Watanabe?
Yeah, interesting question. Before the show, I did talk to my Japanese friends, and told me that in Japan there's an interesting saying called the distance of keeping a bowl of soup warm. So which means if you're really good kids, you better stay with your parents, like within the distance for keeping a bowl of soup warm. So in that case, the real estate develop projects in Japan, if can just gather all your family members together, it's quite popular.
That's indeed a very good policy, humane enough to let either developers of the property enjoy benefits and of course, the children to take care of their children. What do you think of this practice?
No, I think it's fantastic. I mean, Japan has done a lot of, like Professor was saying. I mean, they've done some practical things that it's written, in their overall law, but it's in their culture as well. And I think that they've allowed for places where elderly also can have exercise. I think that they also allow tax breaks, which I don't think he talked about, which is something of taking care of your parents, where you can get a break on the taxes for that as well.
Edward, I'd like to take advantage of your legal background as a lawyer. A similar law in France has been passed. And details have also been revealed. For example, the law in France specifies the number of visits that children should make to their parents and also the living distance between them. I wonder if you have taken a closer look at the contents of this rights of the elderly people law in China.
Yeah, I mean, I like Gloria. I mean, I spoke to my French friends before this. And the difficult thing, I mean, the French law is similar to the Chinese law in as much as it's civil law, not common law. And so they've got these things written out. The implementation of it is not as clear to all people. So that most French people aren't even aware of it. So the education isn't there. But it's been used as a weapon for litigation when people are negligent and grossly negligent, in taking care of their parents. So it is in place, but it's something that is actually more costly to maintain than it is actually to just pay money right directly to the elderly people.
One of the major talking points in public debate online, I'm afraid, is whether the law is enforceable. I mean, they were talking about the feasibility of executing the law.
Right.
Don't you think this law about the rights of the elderly lacks seriously specific regulations? Because if you gave the court rulings, you have to have something to abide by.
Correct.
To define and explain clearly to those involved in the lawsuit.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. But I mean, the way, and this is what becomes confusing to our viewers, I think sometimes, is the way that laws and regulations are made, maybe in all countries. I mean, it's like sausage and law, two things you don't want to see made. But once the law is passed, then we've got a situation where we've got to have implementing regulations, so it's going to be another 6 months before those roll out. Then we have Supreme Court interpretation from the Chinese Supreme Court, which is, going to take some time. So I think that this is all going to be filled in later. But I think, again, there's this huge contrast between people like Gloria I here, who take care of their parents and are in contact and are modern about it, and then there's a whole group of people who are not. So I mean, we need to, it's not for maybe people like her, like Gloria I, but it's for people who are not paying attention and who are negligent.
Here is one crucial issue in dispute, whether the law regarding the rights of elderly people and their interests should be a moral one or a legal one. Should an issue of morality be taken care of by the law itself? I mean, that's one of the major talking points.
Yeah, like what I said just before, like taking up elderly was bordering between the moral and the legal obligation in China. But after the enactment of this law, it gives the rights of the right to the parent. They can protect their benefits from being compromised. Also, not only that, because we see the demand for taking care of the elderly people, so it is really good for parents to just to deepen the social awareness for everyone to take care of their parents. Yeah.
Let me cross over to Professor Watanabe, who's standing by in Kyoto. Hello. The amended law for protection of rights and interests of the aged, introduced in China on July the 1st, states in its 18th clause, family members who live apart from their parents should visit often or send their regards to their parents. Should filial piety be regulated by law, Professor Watanabe?
This is a very difficult question, because if the parents want to have the children living together, and if it is impossible, then the government must take some legal action to make their parents happier. But principally or theoretically, it should not be regulated by law. In Japan, we don't have the direct laws of that, but education and moral ethics suggest that children should visit and give the regards to their parents. But we have very serious problems, so we have some accidents, even crimes between parents and children. So in many countries, Japan, China, and other advanced nations, we may face the very serious problems, and to solve it, very, very difficult.
Let's take a second look at this case, Professor Watanabe, Edward, and Gloria. The coercive nature of a law means, for example, when there is a strained relationship between the parents and the children, it will be more difficult for the law to get involved, right? Because that will make the case even worse. If you are angry with your parents for a minor issue, I mean, it takes time for them to get reconciled. However, at this time, the law steps in. Now, do you think that will help, or it will be counterproductive?
It is also very, very difficult to enforce this kind of the ethical problems. Is not so good for any society. However, to meet between them is good for both of them, but to enforce it legally, it is not good.
Edward, what's your
education?
Take? Excuse me, Edward?
Yeah, well,
in the studio.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with Professor Watanabe in as much as that. What's the cost-benefit analysis? I mean, so we put it in the law, then we get we hire a judge to make a decision, then we bring out police to enforce these meetings between family members. I mean, I can only imagine what these meetings must be like, these forced meetings between family members, the sons and the parents, or the son and the parent. So the cost-benefit analysis of getting all these people involved with this infrastructure, having a lawsuit, is very inefficient. And so I think it's good to have it in the law, because I think it sort of sets an example. In my mind, laws are just a codification of morals and the way that we should operate it as human beings. And sometimes things have to be put in laws that are almost silly sometimes. But at least it brings it to the lowest common denominator that they can understand what they should do.
Gloria, how do you look at this case?
Yeah, actually, when I look at this new law, I realize some very interesting, things. For example, the law is saying, so all the family members have to take care of the parents, not only in the financial way, but also, psychological. But it's very subjective, and also it's saying you have to visit your parents quite often. But what's the exact definition of often? How many times? So it's pretty. I think the law itself is in the right direction, but it's pretty difficult to really implement.
No, I'm talking about the strained relationship between the parents and the children. In this case, do you really welcome the law to step in? I mean, this is very embarrassing for the parties involved. Secondly, I believe in China we have a very unique social phenomenon. I believe 260 million, let me take a look at the specific statistics. 260 million migrant workers.
Right.
I mean, they are living in urban areas and they have traveled a long distance, so they are far away from their parents. They don't have a living room big enough to accommodate 3 generations. Therefore, what's to be done?
Yeah, I mean, and we were talking a little bit about this before the show. I mean, the idea that the real estate prices are so high in Beijing and Shanghai and other places that it would be unrealistic for a migrant worker to say, I'm going to bring my parents to live with me in Beijing. It's almost an impossibility. Yeah. Then they must stay here to work. They don't have the rights to have their children have education because their hukou is not attached here to Beijing. So, I mean, these are the social problems. I mean, Gloria probably has a better insight into this.
I think not only money and the hukou, but also it's saying new law is saying, so the company should, support the employees to visit, to fulfilling that duty to the parents. But
that gives rise to the question of whether employers will be willingly able to give paid leaves to their employees up to 20 days according to the law or regulation. Do you think this is a feasible option?
No, to be honest with you, there's been such a huge burden on employers recently. They've got new laws and regulations that have gone into place, that are coming into place on July 31st. We've had the new labor contract law, which started in 2008. The obligations for employers are really getting large. It's almost getting to be like Western Europe. And so it's not mandated that they can have a home leave. It's mandated that they do have paid leave. And so what they're going to do, whether they're going to go to Thailand or whether they're going to do something else, is another question. But I think that the law will maybe make them think about, I should go back and see my parents when I have a paid leave. But the mandated leave is not to see your parents alone. Do you see what I mean? So I think the laws and regulations with labor are good. I think that whether they're going to see their parents is another thing.
Should the employers be punished if they are reluctant to give the employees paid leave?
Yeah, that's a good question, but it's also very tough. I think for most employers, after the new law, there's no specific really like holiday time, has been assigned to off for this purpose. So what should they do? They are also, I think they're confused as well.
Thank you very much. I believe many more talking points have to be discussed in our prospective editions of Dialogue. But I'll see you next time. Goodbye.